Welcome to State of Mind. This is Julian Royce. Today I'm speaking with Ahva Lenay, and if you don't know her, you are about to, and you are in for a treat. Before I introduce her, a few updates on my own life. I recently got to attend the MeetDelic Conference, which is in Las Vegas, and this was billed as the premier conference for wellness and psychedelics. It was a lot of fun, it was well done. I got to see some amazing people like Duncan Trussell, Aubrey Marcus, and Dr. Carl Hart. Dr. Carl Hart wrote a book some of you may have heard of called Drug Use for Grown-Ups, and he lays out a great case for the legalization of basically all drugs. And interestingly enough, I wrote an essay for the high school newspaper way back when I was like 17 years old, making the same kind of argument for the legalization of all drugs. That essay won an award. It was part of how I got into college. And so it's just interesting all these years later to see these ideas becoming a little more mainstream. And then a real highlight was seeing Duncan Trussell. If you haven't checked out his podcast or Midnight Gospels, a show that he created on Netflix, it's definitely worth your time. And I've discovered he has a genuine interest in Buddhism. It's just inviting people to start practicing meditation, and his invitation to meditate is from such a non-elitist kind of place. I think it's exactly what the world needs right now. Like I've discussed on this podcast before, there is a tremendous excitement about the possibilities of using psychedelics for deep healing, for improving people's lives and well-being in so many different ways, and I share in that excitement. I am also concerned about big corporations being involved in this space. For example, promoting things like ketamine. Ketamine is a wonderful medicine that can help a lot of people. We've discussed that in this podcast with some great people in the past. But there are also real risks involved with it, and I think it's important for people to know that too. It can be addictive, and it can be misused. So this is a big subject, but just having the profit motive in wellness, in health, I think is inherently problematic, or at least potentially problematic. And I found out that the whole MeetDelic conference was in fact sponsored by the nation's largest chain of ketamine clinics. And so I'm not saying that's a bad thing per se, but I do see the danger in being overzealous in promoting or advertising these kinds of treatments, and losing sight of the fact that everyone needs individualized care and attention. Everyone's unique. There's no one-size-fits-all approach that's going to work for everyone. But corporations tend to specialize in one-size-fits-all kind of approaches that they can mass produce and market. And so on a related note, I feel that there's going to be a reckoning with the pharmaceutical industry for our whole country, as a whole. The classic example now of abuse with this is Purdue Pharma, who was marketing and promoting and selling OxyContin for years, and how many lives have been destroyed by opiate addiction. And so I would just hate to see anything like that develop in this emerging field of legal psychedelic medicines, but I think it's worth speaking out about now, as we're at the beginning of this movement. So I wanted to share some of my thoughts on that. And as always, if you want to learn more about my work and see some of my other offerings like writings and other videos, you can now go to astateofmindcounseling.org. And if you're appreciating this podcast, please consider supporting us through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/astateofmind. You can make a single contribution, or you can become a monthly contributor. And if you become a monthly member, you will receive some video and audio of guided meditations, embodiment practices, and other goodies. So please check that out. So today, I am pleased to have Ahva Lenay on the podcast. Ahva is someone whom I have always admired, and I've seen her at events such as Rhythm Sanctuary, which we talk about together, and the Arise music festival, where there's like music and yoga and things like that. And I would see her and I would know that she was someone special. I didn't really know much about her life or about the work that she's doing in the world outside of those contexts. So I wanted to have her on the podcast to hear more of her story, and I'm really glad I did. She works as a ceremonialist and actually helps people with life transitions, including with the dying process. And she also works with conflict resolution and restorative justice, which are so important. It's such important work that the world needs right now. And Ahva shares with us her own experiences with cancel culture and with being attacked online. And she was attacked when Rhythm Sanctuary came back after being shut down for the pandemic. But as she shares with us here, it was in fact never in violation of any local or CDC guidelines concerning gatherings. So it's good to hear about that. And I, for one, and I know I'm not alone here, I'm really glad that it is back and that things like that are returning. It's such an example of a resilient community, because during the pandemic, I and many others, I remember wondering, is that going to come back? Is this weekly amazing ecstatic dance gathering that usually attracts 150 or so people going to return or not? And I'm glad to report that it is. You might be wondering, what is ecstatic dance? Well, it's kind of hard to define, but I looked to my friend Wikipedia in preparing this episode, and I actually really liked what it said. The Wikipedia page says, ecstatic dance is a form of dance in which the dancers, sometimes without the need to follow any specific steps, abandon themselves to the rhythm and move freely as the music takes them, leading to trance and a feeling of ecstasy. And so dances like this have been a part of the human experience for thousands of years, used by shamans as well as just regular people to let move through them what needs to move through them, to release what needs to be released, and to open up to transpersonal states of mind. And without further ado, I bring you Ahva. So I'm here today with Ahva. Ahva, thanks for being on the podcast.
My pleasure.
And I know you mostly from Rhythm Sanctuary, which is a big ecstatic dance. Would it normally have like 100 people there? Something like that?
Well, more than 100 actually.
Wow.
More
Yeah,
like 150 to 200, and then special occasions we kind of bump it up a little even. So
cool.
Somewhere in that range.
How long has that been happening?
This is the 14th year.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I know. It's a blessing for our community and
a
personal blessing for me as well.
I was inspired to ask you to be on the podcast mostly from that. It's how I mostly know you, but It's a really special gathering. It happens every week, and I think a lot of people make friends and community and connections out of that, which is such a gift to the world. It's so needed.
Yeah, it's like a dream come true for me, like hosting a gathering point for intergenerational communion, for people to
all
come
ages,
together, from all walks of life, and definitely can affirm that people make friends and you find their place there. We've just did a wedding there after.
Oh, really?
We extended our time in the venue, and 3 weeks ago we did a wedding, and it was a.
Did they meet at the dance?
They met at the dance.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and they've been engaged. They've been together 5 years since the dance, and they have been engaged for 2 years.
Oh, good.
And they had to postpone because of the COVID.
They took their time. That's good.
And now they're having a baby, so all things are happening, and that's the third wedding I facilitated with folks from Rhythm Sanctuary.
Oh, really?
First one on site. So it was really beautiful.
On site, like at the dance?
Yeah, it was at the dance.
So this one wasn't at the dance?
This one was.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, this is the only one that
this is
has been at the dance.
That's amazing.
I facilitated another.
So everyone who came to the dance was a part of it?
They were welcome to stay and contribute and be a part of it. So after about 160 people were there, we, fulfilled the dance ceremony, and then everyone was invited to stay who felt called, and over 100 people stayed. We had extended, they had these favorite DJs that they just met at a different event.
Cool. That's
so
special.
100 people. It was beautiful.
And you helped to start Rhythm Sanctuary in the beginning?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Really, its history goes back to a dance called Gypsy Nation that started in our region in Boulder with Shannon Jones, who had a vision and researched and found this dance that this man at the time, he went by the name Skywalker. He's a Frenchman. And she got in contact with him, and they launched it at the Avalon Ballroom. And they held it there, and I was really moved by that, and I went and I participated just as a dancer, and I knew we needed something like that in Denver, but I also, while they were just kind of early stage building, I didn't want to draw. And also I never quite resonated with Gypsy Nation. It felt like narrow. I liked a broader gateway. And
like in terms of the name of it?
In terms of the name of it, but I loved the philosophy and the intention behind it, and it was really a beautiful gathering. And that dance, I'm going to say, lasted around 3 years, and within that first year we launched gypsy nation in Denver, but then the maker of that dance and the facilitators of dances that he had, one in Hawaii, one in Washington, one in Taos or Santa Fe, one of those two places. And that kind of all crumbled away. And then we birthed Rhythm Sanctuary as a result of that parentage, you could say.
And it's been going strong ever since.
It's been going real strong ever since.
I was blown away to, of course, it stopped during the pandemic and the shutdown and all that, but I was blown away to come back, when it came back, and I went there and I actually couldn't get in because it was sold out.
Oh.
So I got there a little bit late. But I stood outside and talked to all the other people who wanted to get in.
Man.
But just that there was so many people showing up after it, because I didn't know if things like that would come back in the pandemic. I was like, am I ever going to dance like that again?
Yeah, so, I wasn't sure either.
Yeah, you're fine. Well, that's beautiful. Well, so, I just think it's I wanted to have on the podcast, to discuss this on the podcast a little bit, like this ecstatic dance and what that is. And it's something that I've discovered, I think a lot of people and love, and it's been a big part of my life, but it's not something that I learned about or heard of, or you don't read about it, or what is the history, or how did this happen, or what is it, or what's going on. There's a little bit of mystery with there.
Yeah, there's some good information out and some really inspirational videos and movies, like the history of ecstatic dance. But I feel like what was the thing my kids used to go to? Those late night dances.
Like a rave?
Like a rave, yeah. I think that it's kind of
90s, right? There were raves.
Say that again?
That makes me think of the 1990s.
Yes.
Like a rave scene.
Yeah, and I think it's like a distant cousin or relative of a rave, so to speak.
That makes sense.
But it's also an even more distant relative of the ancient shamanic trance dance that used to happen in villages when the medicine men and the village people would gather together. And its history is really rooted in spirituality, the Shakers, and all these different religions who use shaking medicine, African tribes, the pygmies.
It's an ancient thing humans have been doing in one form or another forever, right? Dance.
Exactly.
And losing yourself in the dance.
Yes, allowing something to, ecstatic, the word itself is to be outside of oneself. And so you could have that kind of experience in a lot of different ways. And I felt a real need for it because I'd been a dance teacher and a dancer all my life. Yeah, ever since I was a little girl, it was something I loved. And
what kind of dance did you train in?
Well, in my early years, I just danced at a little studio and did tap and ballet and jazz and acrobats and all the things that, you do when you're exploring. And then that dropped off for a long time, and I was big on club dancing. I did a little ballroom dancing. I met someone that was a really fun ballroom partner, and that connection in dance was really powerful. I didn't realize until later, looking back. Yeah. And then I moved into a commune and in Washington, in the Highlands, near the Canadian border. And there was a group of women there who were studying African dance and drum. And I got pulled into that, the sound of the drums, the rhythm, and the purpose behind the dance. It was very ritualistic. Those dances were done for rites of passage and seasonal passages, the harvest, the planting, and so on and so forth. And that brought the kind of the spiritual aspect and the more meaningful, which is something I was longing for at that stage. And so I studied that a long time, and then got permission from my Mama Tish, Letitia Williams, who taught at Naropa many years, gave me her blessing to teach something that I was calling tribal fusion, which brought in traditional African dancing with, it was a blending of my background in dance and something that was live drumming was often a part of it. And then that morphed into Rhythm Sanctuary.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah.
Right? So I wanted that deeper experience where people, I was really wanting to bring something forward for community where we could show up and practice being ecstatically sober together. That was real meaningful in there. So
that's a big part of it.
That's a big part of it.
We can come together and dance, and we're not drinking, and also not talking, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a few. Maybe you could share with the people listening, like some of the elements that make it what it is.
Yeah,
like there's
sure.
an opening circle, right?
Yes, we have an opening circle. So I call this, it differs a little. Honestly, when Rhythm Sanctuary was launched, I never even heard of ecstatic dance.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
See, that's fascinating.
It was happening, like maybe
Yeah.
in Hawaii and some places in California, but I never really even heard of it. I just wanted to bring dance in a deeper way for communal connection and, kind of a dance church vibe. And so one of the ways you can cultivate sort of a slightly different than normal and everyday is by having a nonverbal dance and inviting the community to commune through the body language, through the somatic experience, through maybe, slowing the words down and experiencing gesture and the energy between people. And
it's powerful to be around so many people in our bodies and not be talking.
It is powerful.
Like,
and yet we're communing.
Yeah, we're connected. Yeah.
Yeah, we're still connected and we're still communicating. And that's powerful.
Right. Yeah.
And it's an edge that serves us in every facet of our life. So now after 14 years and making that a practice, which makes it the ecstatic dance ritual, I started to, I got off the thread of that, but I call it an ecstatic dance ritual because we come weekly, and if you look at the people who show up, every week when the opening circle, I'll say, how many people might be here for the first time? And, we get a dozen or so folks, but if you go back every once in a while, I'll be like, how many people have been dancing with us for a year? A lot of hands. How many people have been dancing for 5 years? Still a lot of hands. How many people have been dancing with us for 14 years since the beginning? You still get a dozen hands.
Wow. That's incredible.
And that's something.
Mm-hmm.
That's something.
Yeah.
It's touching people and it's making a difference. I've had people say that dance and that community has saved their life, and they're not kidding. They're not exaggerating. They didn't have a place of belonging.
I believe it. Yeah, and I've heard, like at the end of the dance, we circle back up and people will share, and I've heard people express things like that.
Right.
Or how it helped them get through a really tough time, or how they moved to Colorado and didn't know anyone, and now they know a bunch of people, like things like that.
Or we're moving here because we found this community. We got a house 3 blocks away. We can ride our bike.
And take over the neighborhood.
Yeah. So it's a blessing to have that space too. I want to just give thanks for having a space that allows, the capacity there is 360 or something.
Totally. Yeah. Well, just thinking about it with you right now, I love how ecstatic dance is now. It's a thing. People kind of know, or at least a lot of people know what it is or know what to expect to some degree. But it's like, it feels like a very organic movement. It's not controlled or regulated, or you don't have to get a certificate to dance or whatever, right? At least I don't think you do. And so I like that about it. You know what I mean? It's just a natural thing that anyone can do, and it's beautiful and human. But it does have has a lot of intentionality with it at the same time.
It does. I'll tell you, that was a new role for me to hold, being a public speaker and things of that nature. Like Spirit and my community kind of grew me through my willingness just to say yes, which has become a big part of what's important to me at the dance. So people can show up and maybe find more confidence or courage in letting their gifts eke out a little, because as you know, we always used to share food pre-COVID, so there was that space where there'd be a food offering and a blessing, so somebody could dare to speak a prayer out loud or sing a song of blessing and or show their culinary skills and bring a food offering, or come and create beauty by building an altar. There's altars that are representative of the divine masculine and divine feminine energies, the qualities of the feminine. We build an altar together, facilitating, showcasing new DJs and music and their art. And
there's been an amazing painter there the last couple times I was there.
Dougal.
Yeah,
really he's
good.
Beautiful. Yeah. The art of J. Dougal McKnight. And he has a goal of like showing up and doing a series of these paintings through the lens of the experience at Rhythm Sanctuary. And the themes, every dance has a theme. And that's one thing that kind of sets us a little apart from most of the ecstatic dance that I've seen, kind of more outward spread is that most oftentimes what's really being highlighted is the DJ. And
yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah, and for us, it's like the DJ is a crucial, essential, like such appreciated gift to the dance. But so is the facilitation. So is every individual who shows up. So is the people who come early and create the altars.
I love the energy, that what's the word, atmosphere, the attitude, because I experienced that at Burning Man. I got to go to Burning Man, and it was like this big gathering of all these people, but it wasn't about any particular artist or art or music or any, it was everyone there was creating it together. And I feel that kind of attitude there of like everyone, there's a part of it. Like people will start clapping, like they're contributing to the music or or the experience. And, and the opportunity for someone to talk at the end, it's a big thing to speak in front of so many people. And so you can see people like, I would be nervous, like get nervous, and like then they can share, and that's such a, it's a powerful experience to be able to.
It is. It's vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
You have to step up, and I think that's one of the ways we grow each other and support each other to, really offer their gifts back to the community and the world and grow their presence in a way, because it doesn't matter if you're meant to be a public speaker or in front of just your children or your next level of community, or on a stage with 10,000 people, say at a festival or whatever it is. But we just start. I remember the first time that I'd been facilitating in that circle environment for a long time, never use a microphone, nothing. It wasn't really necessary. I have a pretty good carriage to my voice, and it took me a long while to get comfortable even in that. But I was willing to be a fool for God. That was my motto, which later I got graduated by Trevor Hall because he has that song Mad for Spirit. And I'm like, oh, that's it. I'm mad for spirit, and I'm willing to show up in that way, And
you took a chance. You took a risk.
Exactly, and that's what I want to model. You don't have to have your delivery perfected. Just show up, and you're going to grow, and you're going to notice the next, evolution of your path.
I love that. That's so beautiful.
Yeah,
and that we all have that potential.
Yeah,
and in fact, like we're all co-creating this world together all the time, anyway, right?
Yes.
So, like, if I
acknowledged or not,
acknowledged or not, like, so if we. A million people go to a concert and they're all obsessed on the person on stage. Like, that's something that they're all doing together. And that can be beautiful too.
It can be.
But we could also celebrate each other, and it doesn't have to be about a particular person.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me of the story I started to tell of facilitating in a circle and getting really comfortable with that, and then finally saying yes to an invitation to introduce a community that was moving to our area at a big gathering that they were holding, and all this, and I'm like, I got that. I host circles of 200 people, sure. And then all of a sudden, it was so different because I was on a stage with a microphone and on a big PA system, and everybody was seated in chairs looking at me. So this is a learning moment for anybody.
Totally.
And the first, I was like nervous, of course, because it was a new environment, and I speak into the mic, and then I hear my voice, and then everyone's looking at me, and I'm like, wow, could we just get in a circle? I'd feel so much better. Of course, that wasn't an option. Yeah. And spirit grows us that way. And I'm comfortable in that role now, because I'm just willing to show up and be organic and be flawed and awkward, or, and I think if we all just agree to, answer the call in whatever level of our personal evolution or delivery that we're at, then it's going to be okay. I'm not showing up as some expert or authority, or
that's interesting.
I'm not perfect. I haven't perfected anything.
Yeah, the whole the phenomena of public speaking is fascinating, because it's for a lot of people it's like their number one biggest fear, and there's evolutionary reasons why. Because for so much of our evolutionary history, if we got kicked out of the group, we would die probably. And there's kind of a risk of that if getting made fun of or ostracized or whatever. There's some risk like that. I think that's why it has such so much anxiety around it and energy, and But it's also like at the end of the day, like in our world today, like you can get up, you can make a fool of yourself, and it's okay. You're gonna wake up the next day, you're gonna be alive. Like you're not gonna die. But it kind of feels like you might die or something.
Right, I know, it feels like that. In my very short born again passage as a young girl, I remember the sermon included a little story about a fire as an analogy for the congregation. Which is relating to what you were just speaking. And it's like, well, if you're making a fire, you put in lots of sticks, and all of those sticks build a big flame. But if you take one stick out of the fire and cast it aside, it burns for a moment, and then it's down to like embers, and then eventually it can't survive without the other sticks to create the synergy. And I always really appreciate that analogy. But you could take it back and stick it back in, and immediately it ignites. And I do view community that way. We're just greater than the sum of our parts. You know, when we come together, magic happens. And that's the beauty, like, I think of the space of Rhythm Sanctuary. It has a really strong container, and people know the components of the container, the elements of that space that we hold. They know that they have an opportunity to just arrive and dance openly and free for 30 minutes or so, if they can make it, from 7 to 7:30. Then we circle up, and often there's an opportunity for the community to shout into the circle or speak, or we share the parameters, and people know that maybe there's a possibility to share in that window. And then it's this just open dance, the journey that is cultivated by our sound wizards, who are brilliant. We do a lot of vetting for that. And then they know we're going to come back together, and they know they're going to have that moment. Did they write a poem during can they read their poem? Or, and they know all the parts. So the container is solid, and people know, I'm going to show up and I'm going to bring food, and then I'm going to talk about how those strawberries grew in my garden and the poem I wrote. It's like...
It builds trust.
It builds trust and strength, and it's a good thing.
It's beautiful. Well, do you want to share a little bit about, like, I'm curious to learn more about your background, and you were just sharing with me before we started recording, like, some of the work that you do and some of the trainings you've done.
Right. Well, it's interesting. I was a mom at a very young age, so I got pregnant at 22, and I was a single mom.
That's young. Okay.
So 23, had my first child, and I have 3 kids, and they're 20, well, they're, wait a minute, they've grown. My eldest son is 40.
Oh, okay.
And then my daughter is 36, and then my youngest is 29. And so I slipped into that whole family life, and, they say if you want to grow, if you want a fast, speedy spiritual evolution, just partner with somebody or have a family, because you're always faced with some reflection of yourself, and you're always in a really beautiful space of doing your best, and it's a service-oriented space. Ram Dass was really kind of my first real guru. Love, serve, remember. So those have always stayed a real key part of everything that I do, whether it was my family or, Rhythm Sanctuary is my longest relationship with anything or community or outside of my relationship to my children.
Wow, yeah.
And my family members, my mother, etc. But so I started in that realm, and then I moved off grid. I moved out of the city. I lived in a big commune in Washington State. Got turned on to African dancing and drumming.
Was it like a farm?
It was 650 acres, and it was an intentional community called Ontakarana Circle, which still exists. And it's known as Circle A. And, we're 3 generations deep now.
Oh, wow.
And I'm still connected out there, not as much as I'd want to be, but Washington is a long ways away.
Yeah.
But I still have dear friends. And
that's cool to hear that it's still going, because it seems like a lot of people try to start something like that, and it falters or goes for a while and falls apart.
Yeah, it was with the main group, they bought the original town site of a little town called Chisa. I joined in year 2. And that second year, so there were tree planters, a group called the Hodads, and one woman's inheritance, and they put that forward on the 650 acres, and then folks moved there, and then what began was an annual event called a healing gathering, and that's how I got turned on. I'm like, oh, this is my place. I want to live on the earth. I want to reject society. I want a barter trade system. I wanted out of that system. So I was coming from that kind of philosophy and feeling, and so I built a yurt, and I lived in my yurt that I built for 3 years there, and then we built a place, and I lived in that community for 7 years, and that grew me a lot, of course, learning how to really be an earth steward in a community, a contributing community member, and working through councils and sweat lodges. We had a real deep spiritual aspect, bringing forth these healing gatherings and barter fairs and things like that is really a deep part of what grew me. Yeah,
it's a bold thing. It takes courage and alternative lifestyle, but coming from a place of wanting to connect with the earth more,
that was huge.
Yeah, I think things like that have a big impact outside of just the people that are there, obviously. Like, people hear about it, what are the little changes I can make in my life to be more in sync with the environment, to the world.
Right, yeah.
I'm trying to reflect on that for myself.
Yeah, kudos to them, because they're still on that land, and it's beautiful gardens and earth lodges and, real permaculture practices. And before we even really understood what permaculture was, we were really learning from the ranchers and the farmers that lived up there and lived in their traditional ways. And
did you feel like when you were living there, less in the grip of consumerism, of that kind of mentality?
Most certainly, yeah. Like our main, we had a local co-op that was community owned and operated, and so you'd go down and whatever, quarterly you'd order your 100-pound bag of brown rice, but there was produce that, it was just the Okanagan River Co-op. It was just a beautiful place. A little shout out there to my friends still over there. That's in Tonasket, and the Okanagan Highlands is where the community is. And there was a lot of little offshoot communities. We were all exploring and trying new things, and already acknowledging that the old way wasn't working, and nor was it sustainable or holistic. And so
what year was that?
Sure. 81. Oh, okay. 1981. Yeah, I can only track that because that's the year my first child was born. So I happen to know it was that year that I moved out there. And so I spent 7 years there. And then, I just had a longing and a desire to serve in more deep ways. As a young girl, the things that were really alive for me was I always dreamt of having a dance studio and being a dance teacher. I was just reminiscing about my first dance teacher, Paula Nichols, and it brought tears to my eyes because I was really realizing for the first time what an impact it really had on me. She had on me. Like pay attention to the teachers we looked up to. If we want to, a lot of people are struggling to find their path, and I'm passionate about this and this and this and this and this, but what do I choose, And I think if we can trace it back, I
noticed that a little bit more myself, and in some people I'll work with or talk to, that something that they were really inspired by when they were a child that comes back and it's still there, and there's something there's something to the idea that we're born into this world with certain personality, temperament, destiny. I don't know if you want to go there, but maybe not for everyone, but for a lot of people.
No, I believe it, and I think it's true. Like, if we want to, I think most of us as humans, we really appreciate being able to experience and live in joy.
Right.
To flow with ease and grace in our days, and to feel like we're contributing and that we're loving and loved, all of these things. That's our human quality and our need, and so I think if we're lost and seeking that, let's just start looking backwards in time to the earliest memories of that which brought you joy. Was it being in front of the ocean and playing in the water, or hiking in nature. Or for me, I was always a teacher. I always played dance teacher. We had recitals in my basement. I taught piano. I mean, I can't even play now at all. But back then, our confidence is high and we're so easily just inspired and moved by the things that bring us joy. I loved going into the swamp. I loved being an adventurer. I loved making pretend stores. And I've connected that now to my love and talent for building altars. Because I would think of how I'd organize things, like cereal boxes and used cans mixed with weeds from the garden that were in the produce department. And, I'm still arranging and creating space.
Right.
And so that was always a part of something I did.
Yeah.
And I say teacher or leadership, I really shun those qualities or archetypes later in the sense of hierarchical view. Like I didn't believe in that. Yeah, right. A teacher knows more. But I've just come to learn that, I think it was Buckminster Fuller, he was quoted as saying, the qualities of a good leader is someone who inspires other leaders. That I can relate to. So if we're kind of redefining at least my old understanding of a teacher or a leader.
Rather than it being about power.
It's not about the hierarchical power over. It's about shared power and synergy, upliftment, and realizing that's why I love and value the circle so much. Yeah. A circle, there's no hierarchy in a circle. We all just hold our place in the circle, and the power of a huge circle is palpable when you're in it. Yeah. And or it just amplifies whatever's present. So if you're nervous,
there's an energy and electricity there.
It shows us. It's a it reflects what's alive in the circle for each individual and also as a collective field. So
I appreciate you sharing that about being a kid and playing as a teacher and whatever, and then the kind of rebellious phase of rejecting that, and then coming around to a wisdom of that we can have leaders that don't have to be about power and authority, about sharing knowledge and coming together, and there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, I think of nature.
It's human. Yeah, I think humans are meant to. We do that naturally. We have groups and leaders, and it doesn't have to be a bad thing.
No, I think that hierarchy does have a place in maybe a new definition of hierarchy. Yeah. It's not this kind of hierarchy, this pyramid that never shifts. It's sort of more like communal hierarchy, like I think of the geese. And I think of how when they fly north, there's a goose in the front, and then at a certain point, that one falls back, and then the next, there's a organic system to the way they migrate and the way they are together, and that's something to learn from. They end up flying so much farther in that formation, right, than if they were all doing their own thing, wandering around. And geese are amazing. They're so powerful. They're so powerful. I have tons of geese stories.
It's interesting to me how some animals, we hear about some animals that are going extinct, and that's sad. But then there's some species like the geese that are on the ascendant, taking over the world. It seems like. I know. It's heartbreaking in some in my community, there are culling geese, and there's so many. There's so many, and people don't respect them. And for me, they're just really sovereign beings that. I don't know if we have time for a goose story, but they are very empathic, and they are very tuned in to their environment, to their community. They have good boundaries. They have great boundaries. If you walk too close to them, they'll come at you. That's right, they will. Snap at you. They will. When I was a little kid, my brother got goosed by a goose. That's funny. Yeah, well, they're loyal. They have their own ceremony. Oh, really? Yeah, they really do. I'll tell you briefly. I witnessed once, I drove a pond at Sloan's Lake, a big circle of geese. And I'd already been practicing trying to walk. I lived there, and I was trying to walk through them. Like, as you said, if you get too close, they'll charge you. And I was practicing my Zen, walk through the geese. And I had actually mastered that. I could walk through the geese, and they weren't bothered. They didn't charge me. They didn't even separate after a while. I meuld, I would, I could weave through them because I like
walking along the inside by the water. So one day I was driving to work and there was this big circle of geese and I was really curious about it, and I slowed down and I could see that there was 2 geese in the middle of this circle. All the geese were facing the center of the circle, and I say a big circle, I'm talking about maybe 40, 60, I don't know, maybe 80 geese. It was huge. And so I pulled over. I was so curious, and I just really quietly got out of my car and I walked a little closer in view, but I still wasn't really in their field, their frequency. Yeah. And I was watching, and then I was sad because one of the geese in the middle was laying down, and my thought was that it had died, and that must be its partner. Because I'd been studying geese medicine, from that perspective a little bit. And so the one in the middle was standing over the one laying down, and I just felt really sad for a moment and really curious that they were all like in a circle around these 2 geese. Then, right when I had that thought, the goose that was lying down lifted it stood up and it unfolded its spine and it like reached its wingtips up and its head and it went like this, and then it went and it fell down to the ground and it died. That was its last breath. And it just reminded me of
that's amazing.
The phoenix, And then the goose that was over it just went about pecking in the grass, and then all the circle dispersed and everybody went back about their business. But it was like they were waiting for that final decision, the last breath.
That's an amazing story.
It's an amazing story. There's a second part to it too, but maybe for another time.
When the geese died, it was done.
That it was done, that goose died. But I had read about their loyalty and that they would never abandon a fallen comrade.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that they would stay, the whole flock.
You're inspiring me to learn more about geese. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I think that there's something, I think some people have a sense of when they're going to die, or it's interesting, the death process, if there's not an accident or violence or something that causes death, like the natural process, I think it makes sense to me that you would have an intuition.
Yeah, a lot of times we hear about that. We hear about individuals that had some kind of sense, or maybe they weren't conscious of it, but there was an entry in their diary, this happened to me, that their father found later, as if she knew.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? That was a young girl, and I hear a lot of stories like that. I studied with Stephen Jenkinson in Death Douhla work a little bit, and so I'm, as a ceremonialist, I'm really devoted to these rites of passage, birth, death, and all the things in between.
Those are the biggest ones, I guess. But,
those are the big ones, yeah.
So part of what you do is helping people to mark a rite of passage.
Yeah, as a ceremonialist, I definitely like the weddings, and
beautiful.
I'm an officiant via the internet, the Universal Life Church now. Oh, cool. But no, when I'm called upon, it's not like I have a card or anything, but I'm called upon by my community a lot, and I like to be able to say yes. So,
that's a big topic, actually. The rites of passage, or the lack thereof, for so many people, and especially from childhood to adult, that weird gray area that for some of us seems to go on forever. Like, when do you actually become an adult? But and then it's one thing to become, the age of 18 or 21, but another thing to feel it, know it in your bones, like that.
And to have it recognized.
To have it recognized, yeah.
And to have it witnessed.
Absolutely, yeah.
And to feel supported, and to mark it as a momentous occasion. Like, those are really empowering moments in our life. And if, young women who are entering, their menstrual phase, their menarche phase of life, there's so much shame and embarrassment around it. But if they grow up learning that that's a rite of passage that allows them to become mothers and creators of life, to actually grow, if we start reframing, and I say start, there's so much of this work now, like rites of passage, and for young men and women is, it's a thing now, there's a lot of it, whether it's a wilderness kind of walkabout, vision quest, sort of a rite of passage, or a gathering.
If you have to kind of seek that out yourself and sign yourself up, and I mean, it's different than in a traditional culture where that would be
Exactly.
I think that is, it's beautiful, wonderful that people are offering that, and I've thought about doing something like that myself just to experience it. I mean, I've had my own kinds of rites of passage, but I haven't been part of an official ceremony in that way. But I was going to say that I think that there is, as beautiful and as good as that work is, there's like this way in which things like that and healers and, it's happening and there's a money exchange and it can feel a little artificial or a little, I don't know, I'm just naming that piece of it. I think I see that in therapy a lot too. It's like there's a lot of people who feel really alone. They feel really alienated, and it's wonderful to have therapists and healers and guides who can work with you, but it's also sad that that's not, that our culture is such that we can become so separated and so disconnected or feel so disconnected, and then it becomes a way of making money. And I've seen this with like communities, like people get really excited, they're creating this community, and then there's like a membership thing, and then there's for someone at the, it's kind of a business at the same time. It's just like everything in our society is organized that way. And I wish that everything didn't have to be that way.
Right. Well, you're a practitioner, right? You see clients.
Yeah.
Do you have a way to address that disparity in your practice?
I've been thinking about that, and I just like the other week I had 2 people reach out to me really wanting therapy, wanting to work through trauma, and both said they didn't have any money. And so I created a thing in my private practice to have 2 or 3 spots for people who just have no money. Because the sliding scale, I can offer like a discount, but that's still a lot of money for someone who doesn't have money. So I'm trying it out as an experiment, and I work with a supervisor who helps me, and he's pretty skeptical, but we're gonna see how it goes. Because it's like I have to hold good boundaries, and they need to show up on time, and they need to do their work. And oftentimes, if someone doesn't pay for something, they don't value it. So I don't want I'm experimenting, but I'm just one person. I think the bigger issue is there under the surface to like find. Hopefully, therapy helps people find really genuine, authentic connections and deepen in their relationships outside of that context. I think that's the part of the goal of it.
Yeah, I've been playing with that a long time in my practice as well, and that's why Rhythm Sanctuary is a sliding scale.
Oh yeah.
It started as a donation base, but people don't value, like you said, or at least we're just not programmed to think that way.
If something's free, we don't value it.
And there's a lot of a scarcity operation kind of a mindset. So if people can show up and donate $2, but then you're paying rent for a venue that costs you a couple grand a month, and you got to cover that. And there's other expenses and musical equipment, and people don't always understand that. But I made a sliding scale, $12 to $25, and sometimes, and the generosity that shows up in that is just phenomenal. It's just really phenomenal. And often somebody will be like, oh, here's $50. I'd like to just pay it forward if there's someone who can't pay. And if not, then, put it towards whatever you guys need. We're happy to support. And then someone comes in and they're like, oh, shoot, I didn't know I couldn't use my credit card here. And you're like, that's all right. Somebody paid forward. We got a list going here, cool.
And then that's such a beautiful feeling and
it starts to change the mindset as well. And I remember being in line in the drive-thru at Starbucks, and I went to pay, and they're like, "Oh, that's okay. The person in front of you paid it forward." And I'm like, "Oh, cool." And then they're like, "Do you want to pay it forward?" And I'm like, "Sure." I ordered a $5 drink or whatever, and they're like, "Okay, that'll be $15." And I'm like, "Oh man!" And I did it. It was a good learning moment. But
because you're getting the people behind you. That's cool. That's a good way.
I was getting the people, and I just had to go with it. Like, okay, we're trying new experiments. I think is the main thing.
I guess, talking about it with you. I mean, money's not bad, and to maybe just make it more conscious and kind of own that that's how we've chosen to structure our world. And I like the idea of universal basic income for some of these reasons, because if everyone who lives here in this land, in this country, is given a certain amount of money just to live, then they can do with it what they want. We could take some of this. People, tremendous anxiety and pressure around survival that it's not helpful.
Well, and it's just heartbreaking that we have so many homeless.
So many homeless people,
I mean, that's not right.
No.
Like, we have so many resources, and so maybe that would help towards that. I started off with, when I lived in that commune, I had mentioned that I just really wanted to get out of like Maine society in the way that it was structured. And I really was coming from a place of money is the root of all evil. Like if we didn't have money, the world would be a great place. And so I lived in scarcity. I mean, you know, like hand to mouth, and if I was lucky, hand to mouth for a long time. And then
there's a stress in that too, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. And it worked pretty good in my community because we had about, I don't know, back then maybe there were 12 families that lived on 650 acres, and we all tried to support each other and share what we grew. We all tried to grow complementary things, so we had food for the winter. But then I just realized that as I had children, and I wanted them to learn how to function in the mainstream society, so to speak, that I needed to kind of revisit that philosophy, and that money is not the root of all evil. It's how we view it, how we hoard it, how we indulge it. And then I started thinking, wow, money is simply a resource for abundance and prosperity. And I changed I just tried on, wow, I'm going to just pray for as much money as possible. I want to make as much money as I can. And I know that sounds greedy, but I knew that if I made a lot of money, I would circulate a lot of money. Yeah. And that nobody in my family, my kids would not have nice shoes, you know, for the snow boots. Like that was always a thing. Every year, snow boots for the 3 kids, you know. I mean, that's a real thing. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, my kids deserve snow boots, and so do yours. And so it started out in that realm. And I feel like, circulation, that's the key.
Circulation,
that I am a prosperity circulator. And so, like, oftentimes we'll get somebody and they'll want to come in and they don't have any money, and they don't understand that it's not just a donation, it's a actual sliding scale, because as you said, we need to honor the event space, you know, what it takes to devote and hold.
Appreciation, right?
It is. It's a reciprocity in and of itself. And but we're in a position now where I can say, oh, and they'll tell me a little bit about something, and they just moved here oftentimes. They spent all their money on the move, or this thing happened to their car, you know, whatever it is. And we give them a punch card. And it's like, oh, well, be our guest for the next 3 weeks. And here's this little card. When you check in, just ask for that, you know. And sometimes it's been more. And we also have temple keepers who show up, and they get the gift of, you know, being of service and creating beauty in the space, and they get that dance and their next dance free. Oh, cool. Or they could use that dance and bring a guest.
They're helping create it.
And, you know, we're just fostering a new way of prosperity and viewing, like circulating prosperity and abundance.
That's beautiful. I'm glad we got on this topic because it's such a big one.
It is.
It's good to have a positive attitude, to actually think it through. And
I felt the same way when I went into massage therapy. That was my kind of first therapist hat that I wore, and I felt the same way. I never wanted to do massage because it was a gift, you know, people valued it. It was a gift from spirit. I just wanted to pass it forward, and then my life circumstances changed, and I needed gainful employment so I could rent a house and put gas and feed my children and so on and so forth. And I went to school to become a massage therapist, knowing that I really wanted to work with energy. I really wanted to do more psychotherapy, but that maybe understanding physiology and biology were really good things to understand before moving into another realm of delivery, if you will. So I do a lot of conflict resolution and justice work. And
so I guess just to close this thought a little bit, like part of what I was thinking is, I felt this in myself in the past. I don't anymore, but some people, I think, like they want help, they need help, but then the act of giving money in exchange for it feels fake and not real, and it like fuels this kind of bitterness or alienation. And so maybe listening to this will help. Like maybe we can change our attitude around that and have an attitude of generosity, of circulation, of just acceptance of how the world is structured, rather than fighting against it in that way.
I pray for that.
So,
I pray to model that. And I see a lot of events now that are like sliding scale, And I've coached a lot of people. Yeah, well, if you want to actually create prosperity, that donation, or people say this much donation, that's not really accurate. If you're requiring payment, a donation is not the right word,
That's true.
So you might want to, we've got to get real honest with our value and what we're offering and how we're experimenting. And, I think it's a good thing. And yeah, may we all be abundant and prosperous in all the facets, of our humanity.
Well, so you were saying you do conflict resolution as well? Mm-hmm. That's a great thing to offer and do.
Yeah,
we need more of that.
We need a lot of that because communication is, as technology advances and the whole cancel culture and all of that kind of a thing is happening, and it's so easy to
Talk
just
about ostracizing.
and not take responsibility or not have empathy or not consider like a bigger picture of what effect our words have. Like words are so powerful for creating.
That's a great point. Yeah, they become too cheap, right? You just type them up and hit the return key or your phone or whatever.
Right, and often that would be the mild side of it, honestly, right, Julian? People are attacking each other on social media, and that whole cancel culture thing is a real thing happening.
Yeah.
And I experienced some of that coming back with Rhythm Sanctuary, and it was really hard to navigate, even though I could, I had my own center of balance and spiritual relationship intact and a support group, and I'm a person well-resourced, and the way that affected me, like a cyber attack, was still
online.
Really dismantling, online for, being irresponsible for gathering.
So when you're bringing Rhythm Sanctuary back, there are people that were against it because of COVID, pandemic.
This couple outspoken
such
individuals, such a divisive issue. And, I don't have a political view on it. I only have my personal experience, and I'm willing to follow our state guidelines and CDC protocols.
You closed it down for over a year, right?
14 months.
14 months, yeah. That's long enough.
That's a long time. And the first 2 dances we came back, we were fully masked as was required and mandated. And our capacity was 150. We gathered under the 150. So the attack came from somebody who hadn't even come to the dance.
Oh, interesting.
But,
so they're not even informed of what exactly what you're trying to do.
Yeah, so that can harm. And I just think, I'm my first credo as a human being and a woman in the world is, harm me none, do no harm, not with my actions, my words, my thoughts. And those things are harmful. They harm our reputation. And even as people stepped up and said, well, you don't know Ahva, or we didn't see you at the dance, or we're under capacity. What do you mean we're not following, CDC guidelines or mandates? And that's not true. Then that person their comment was deleted and they were defriended or whatever the thing is that you do.
So this happened on Facebook?
This happened on Facebook, yeah. So it's a big thing, and I just want to
well, if you had
encourage people to exercise caution, and let's go. That's why this started with my work in conflict resolution. Let's sit down face to face, heart to heart, eyeball to eyeball. And are you still going to say those same things?
Right.
Are you really not willing to find a deeper connection or understanding that can bring us outside of this experience that certainly just reflects some underlying brokenness or misunderstanding, and it's different when we don't have that.
Yeah.
So COVID didn't help that at all. So I'm very busy in that world.
It's been such a divisive time, so it's good we need more conflict resolution. I don't know. I've had similar conversations with a lot of people, how the pandemic, the issues around vaccine, of course, Trump and the media, quote unquote, the media and this and that, and, it's to be able to stay connected on a heart level with people, even if you maybe disagree about something, you can still be connected. You can still talk. You don't have to.
That's right.
You don't have to cast them out like they're the devil or try to cancel them.
Right. You can have your anger and own it in connection. It makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
But if we're not in connection with that person and we're spreading anger, then it's just toxic poison we're spreading around because it's not connected. It can't do anything but harm.
Right.
It can't do anything but spread poison. But if we're face to face, that's all different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was brave of you to stand up and restart it. And I would guess, I would bet a lot of money that you got way more support, like that the number of people who were against it were probably the minority. Because I know so many people that are really grateful to be there and have it.
Yeah, it's true.
And it happened after, the vaccines came out and blah, blah, blah. So
it's true.
I think there was this bigger conversation that if we had a healthier, more sane society, we all would have been able to participate in, of like, okay, there's a pandemic happening. Yes. At what point and how do we want to start reopening things? And instead of just became this awful thing of people attacking each other and then the other extreme of people saying that it was a fake thing or all that other side. So it's just
I was accused of being a QAnon conspiracy theorist, which I rarely broadcast. My messages are love memes and be the light,
so just by
be the change.
Just by restarting the dance, you recalled that?
I was.
With no other reason? Oh.
Yeah, no. Well, I might have accidentally published something that I thought was a fairly reputable, interview with somebody that upon a deeper look was not really a reliable resource, which I retracted and apologized for and said, all right, let this be a lesson to everyone to, someone shared this with me that I respected and trusted, and as upon further research via comments, I've decided, that this is not true. This is not something I want to I don't know enough, but we all should be humble and we should be brave and willing to, apologize or retract something or without shame.
Right.
We should be shamed because we got excited and shared something.
We're all operating with imperfect information. If we get new information, we can change. That's like a humble, human, honest way of being in the world rather than you're not allowed to say anything wrong. And if you say something that was wrong, then you get canceled. Right. I hate that kind of atmosphere. It's just
it's not. Let's not grow that. Let's promote understanding.
It's like what you were saying about the big circle and someone can stand up and share something. Maybe they misspeak or make it, but it's okay.
But it's okay. They sing out of tune. It's okay. It's but it's okay because how brave. Let's celebrate the courage that it took for that individual, or they forget the words, or I stumble all the time like that, sometimes, opening ceremony at a rise, I'm just winging through it and, feeling into what's present. And that's a lot of people. And it's oh, did I just say, okay, I take that back. You all know what I meant, right? Let's just be part of each other, let's encourage and lift each other up. And,
we don't all have to be experts on everything.
We don't.
We live in an age of information, and so I've really tried to avoid rabbit holes of online arguments where the other person then is well, why don't you read this, and this, and here's 300 pages of documents.
Exactly.
This is about ivermectin and COVID, and I'm no, I'm not a biological, medical scientist, and I'm not going to spend the next week studying this thing.
Right.
If you want to, that's your free choice.
Right.
I'm gonna
There's great
focus
resources.
on what I can offer.
That's right. There's great resources out there for people who want to seek a deeper knowledge of what's going on.
It takes. Yeah, it's not. Anyway. It
takes
skill to do that,
It's hard not to talk about it.
At the end of the day, it's what sources do you trust? That's kind of what it comes down to. And
at the end of the day, what I want to say is, let's get right with our own bodies, our own sense of intuition and our impulses, and that trust that our body gives us, and the information, the ways our body informs us of. At the end of the day, let's just act in accordance with ourselves. As long as we're not harming anyone and we're doing our best not to spread misinformation or misrepresent who we are in the world. We're humble and, we're servants in that way. That's all we need. And if we can tune into our own yeses and nos, and that's why I believe so much in dance as medicine. We come into our own embodied experience, and we can amplify that in a group like an acupuncture point that creates healing for everyone present and then ripples out into our families, our community, and even beyond that. Because we have pollinators, how many times have you maybe been at a dance and someone said, well, I've been to all these other ecstatic dances, but none is quite like this one.
Yeah,
there's not really, I hear that so much. And it's not that we're better, and it's not that, it's just that I feel we're really holding a container that has a lot of integrity for our community to just show up and grow.
Yeah.
And we're not shaming, and we're not being experts on anything. We're working towards all these things that create healing, consent, and recognition of personal space and sovereignty. All these big things that are really up for us right now. Yeah. Can we do it, and can we traverse our way through the conflict having even a strongly different experience or opinion than someone else, and still love out the other side? That's all I want.
Yeah.
Can we still at least respect coming out the other side?
Respect, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, I think Rhythm Sanctuary has enough people coming consistently enough. It's built up its own center of gravity, its own container, like you're saying, its own communities. But the other thing I was going to ask you about was the Arise Music Festival, and you're part of that, and you helped create the Wisdom Village there. Yes.
I lucked into that because I knew the original visionaries, Tiero Lee and Paul Bassis, just beautiful brothers that are on a mission to create community and awareness and sustainable, actually regenerative living, and to learn from each other. They're just beautiful individuals, and that was the early vision. And I participated every year. It happened in that original form for 7 years. And then last year, or 2 years ago, 2019, I like to call it a divorce. There was a divorce that happened, as divorces will. People grow apart between the original visionaries and somebody who came on who is a natural visionary and had the money to back it, but then the artistic flow and communication, it didn't sustain through a conflict. And so now the Arise Music Festival is operated by Luke Homer, and he has brought forth a lot of beautiful things for our community. His effort and his heart is in the right place. He secured a beautiful piece of land to grow the Arise Music Festival, and he foresees that as being a real state-of-the-art, like evolutionary regenerative space to grow the festival, and it's going to happen in May this year.
Oh, it is.
And
okay.
I honor that, because for me, Arise is like the child of these parents, and also I consider Tiero Lee a real brother and Paul Bassis a real brother. They grew me so much. They, like Rhythm Sanctuary, it's like a many faceted kind of wheel that Rhythm Sanctuary could connect to and be a part of, and to show up and grow a village where we get to, be together. And that was their idea. And they had all these villages, and Healer's Village and Children's Village, along with, the stage and the performers and yoga. And so it's a yoga. So they're alive and strong. And I think we can look for some really beautiful festival energy coming out of what they've been kind of gestating.
Beautiful. And you're going to be a part of it?
I want to be a part of all of it. It's just like Arise is like my child too, like it's its own child. Were you there at the beginning of that? I was there since the beginning. Beautiful. Yeah, for all 7 years that it got to come through our community. So my hope and my prayer is that, yes, I want to be a part of Arise, and whatever new name festival will come forth from Paul and Tiero and the heavy crew that are all of the co-creators of making that magic, because that was 10,000 souls on the ground, as Paul Bassis would say. 10,000 souls on the ground, bringing forward the magic that was the Arise Festival, the Arise Music Festival. So we can look forward to like a new rebirth of their vision and what's coming forward to. So good things happening in both camps, and I just wish it all the best. And
it's beautiful.
It's a little awkward, There's always like, when there's conflict, there's sides. Yeah, it's hard.
That's part of why I'm impressed that Rhythm Sanctuary's continued for so long without things like that happening. At least so far as I know.
No,
it's still there.
I mean, there's been things, hiccups there's sometimes drama, but I don't think we intentionally bring our drama to that circle. We intentionally come there, with medicine at the forefront, like dancing through it, like using our bodies, like communing with each other, using the music. I mean, we're
the word? Resilient. That's what I'm looking for.
It is resilient.
To go through COVID and come back so strong is amazing. So.
Yeah. Well, hopefully
it'll stay.
However long we're destined on this planet, dancing and music and arts will always be, showing us the way.
I think I hope that this is true in general, that the pandemic isn't stopping these amazing things that are happening. That they took a break, a long break, but that they can come back.
Well, I have also the folks who operate our venue to thank. They didn't charge me any rent. They let me keep our storage room with all of our sacred accoutrements that we use to adorn and support the space. And I owe the Sons of Italy a great debt of gratitude for them allowing us to. And they love us, We've been there probably 11 years now.
Wait, so just real quick, what is the Sons of Italy?
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't know 100%, but when I think of them, I think of like the Shriners, who also do benefit work for raising funds. They're a nonprofit organization, and they put children in hospital programs that don't have money, and they collaborate. And yes, there's also criticism. That was also a point of contention. Like, we're not coming there because, they're the ones who said Columbus discovered America. I mean, come on. We need forgiveness. We need to move on in history.
We need more about the mafia or something.
Well, and that too. I mean, I've heard it all. Now, I'm a daughter of Italy because I, in the last few years, had to become a member to keep operating there. But I've worked with nothing but beautiful individuals, families that are really entertaining and quirky, and I've learned a lot from working with the groups there. So I have almost tears in my eyes because there's such a mutual fondness, really. So I'm very grateful.
It's wonderful to have the physical space and building, and that's an issue around here in Boulder. There's just not that many spaces, and rent is so expensive, and I don't know, there's just not a lot of support in that way, unfortunately. I wish there was more.
Yeah, Avalon Ballroom was a real blessing.
Oh, yeah.
That's a good spot.
That's true. There's a few.
For dancing, and there's still a few things going on in the dance realm at Avalon, which is, my understanding, that's part of Naropa.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
okay.
That the Avalon Ballroom is part of Naropa.
Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting.
I know.
Do you want to share with us a little bit about what you do for work while you're here?
Sure. So, I'm pretty busy. I studied with a really brilliant woman who was 28 years a trial attorney, Sylvia Clute. She's in her mid-70s, I think, now. And she formed the Alliance for Unitive Justice, which is really based on restorative justice best practice, which was founded by, for lack of a better word, Dominic Barter. She studied with him directly, and I'll just give a shout out because I value it so much. She brings in Course in Miracles principles. So 28 years as a trial attorney, she just could no longer function in a corrupt kind of sold out system. She just was seeing more harm than good. So she developed this Alliance for Unitive Justice. So I hold unity circles.
Such a big thing, big issue.
Yeah, it's a very simple way of coming together with the understanding that we're doing so because we want deeper understanding. So I facilitate those, and also have had the honor of training facilitators in unity circles as well.
Is this recognized by the court system?
It is. In Virginia, which is where Sylvia is from. Oh my God, it's just... There's so much happening. Please Google Alliance for Unitive Justice and see all the academic programs that they have and what they're doing in the schools for education. And right now she's working with two incredible men who were both on death row with life sentences and started doing justice work in the system. And now there's a re-entry program. That system is complex and severely broken. So it is recognized there, and restorative justice has been in practice here too. So I see one-on-one clients, and I see small groups, couples, partner, all of those things, because these are just universal tools that we can use. And The training I have in a variety of modalities just really kind of lands and locks together in a way that I can be observant and just, I like the term facilitator better than moderator.
Yeah.
You know, that moderate, it kind of suggests we're bringing something to the center, like two views for it to be moderate, mediation to bring it to the center.
Yeah, that's kind of a heavy word, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a heavy word, but a facilitator, you know, it comes from just to move with ease. And that's my job. So kind of a sacred witness who has some really good tools to work with that people seem to relate to and value. And so I've been staying real busy with that.
That's wonderful.
And I do that out of my home, but I also go to places of business. I've also learned that we can do it virtually, so that's new.
Oh, nice.
Because I never really stepped into that world, but then there were a few requests, and that was the only way it was going to happen. And I was really delighted that we could hit a rapport, even in a virtual container, like that we could still have a real authentic experience.
Yeah. That's been something that the pandemic has taught me, and a lot of people, that you can connect in a good way. And I don't know if it's, my preference is to be in person when possible, but it can work well.
I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, this is fun.
Right, you can just feel that affinity. Yeah, it's good.
The computer screen has a lot of potential for that, but there's also the potential of the distractions or the less presence and focus. And
a unity circle, you know, for resolving conflict and getting out the other side in a good way with, you know, beneficial actions for all parties. People tend to really show up and be, you know, really deeply engaged.
It's such good, important work that we need so much more of. Like, I think this is a big, all the, you know, Black Lives Matter, George Floyd killing protests. That's a big thing that's on and it wasn't a topic on the front of a lot of people's minds 10 years ago. So it's a new, I think it's new that so many people, it's becoming a more mainstream issue. Our prison system is broken, this justice system is working, all the 2 million people in jail is not good, it doesn't make any sense, like what are we doing? Yeah. That's a more mainstream thing to say now. When I was growing up, I was thinking of those kinds of thoughts, but I couldn't say it in school without people like, what are you talking about? And
I know.
It was the tough on crime era. Right. That's when I grew up, like, just say no and tough on crime. And so I think we're moving in a good direction here. Seems like it.
Yeah. I think so. And I think that's what happens. We've been yoga, we have a lot of consciousness raising through the practice of embodied experiences and practices. So I think you bring the light into something that's going to hit these dark areas that need to come to the light for healing. That's the shadow work, you know. So
there's some amazing,
agree.
There's some amazing work being done bringing trauma information and processing and therapy to prisons. And there's a movie I saw recently that was showing that. It was amazing. These prisoners were like actually looking, my dad beat me when I was a kid, and that's why I was violent when I was an adult. And to make those connections and do that work, that's what we really need, I think.
I think so too. And there are people that I really admire that are doing a lot in healing the collective trauma. And I feel really grateful for that work. And I'm very called to that work. And the unity circles are just a real natural. I'm just seeing how all of the facets of what I bring in the world are really connected to bring to delivery this bigger thing of healing collective trauma. Whether it's in the lineage or your community or like, it's time.
It's so big.
It's time to bring it forward. Obviously, because it's rising up and we're figuring out how to go about how we do that. How do we make that quantum leap? It feels necessary to have a real quantum leap to me right now in the trauma realm.
I agree. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. I feel really grateful.
If people want to find you, do you have a way for them to...
There is a Rhythm Sanctuary website. This might, and if you write to that site, you'll get a hold of me.
Okay.
It's a little out of date, but it's still up and operating, and maybe this will inspire me to get that updated and together. People can write to me also through email, ahvalenay@gmail.com.
Okay.
And that's the way.
Great.
Or in person at Rhythm Sanctuary on a Thursday night.
Yeah, you can make it down.
Yeah.
That's the best way. Well, thanks so much for being on.
Well, thanks for having me, Julian.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Uh-huh.
I love the work you're doing. Thank you. I have a beautiful poem that came to me this morning. It's called Courting the Muse, and it's written by Tiffanie DeBartolo. And it seemed very apropos, so I'm happy to share it with you. It's called, as I said, Courting the Muse. Let your body find its place in this world, and let the world find its place in your body. Love them both as if they are the same. They are. All parts are welcome here, embraced, courted, nurtured, especially the parts that desperately want to dance with the world inside of you. During this wooing, this romance, this deep dive into mystery, and every... I lost my place. This deep dive into mystery, yours and the world's, do not forget you're seducing yourself. And every moment is an invitation to beguile your soul. Every moment a longing to make love to your own fire, on the wind and in the dirt. Look around and walk in all directions consciously. Only then will you recognize you are walking in a circle. Only then you will notice how all the parts you discover are connected. And as you stand alive at the center of it all, engaged, awakened, present, you will meet yourself and your beloved as if for the first time, the one whom you have always known, the one whom you have always been. And you will celebrate your wholeness with grace, with gratitude and compassion, and a full body knowing that love begets love. Isn't it beautiful?